My name is Brian Walpole. I'm Head of Strength Conditioning for Esher Rugby, a National 1 division team in the UK. I'm also the Head of Training for Workshop Gymnasium, and I'm an international tutor for Exos. One of the most important elements for kids at that age group, at that developmental age, is incorporating a large variety of movement. Building strength is key. There's been a lot of talk and I guess healthy arguments about whether kids should strength train at that age, and a lot of the new research is supporting that kids at that age are, if they have a well thought out, well balanced program delivered by an experienced strength conditioning coach, then they should be able to strength train to a fairly high level safely and effectively. So I think the new research and the new science is telling us that kids can lift heavy weights and get strong at a young age. And the key thing is obviously to make it fun. You don't want to get too serious at that age in terms of their strength training or the time in the gym. There's plenty of time for that as they grow and get into the higher levels. But without question, a variety of movements, making sure they're not doing the same patterns over and over and over again, which is one of the big ways that you'll reduce range of motion or increase the risk of injury for some of these younger players then getting into the higher levels as they go on. So a large variety of movement, the key motor patterns, so the things that transfer onto the pitch, change of direction, and again, which you can see in the strength programming part of the clips. But in terms of strengthening the key movements that are relative to the game. So using the term inflexible often relates to having a lack of range of motion in the body. So for example, a lot of people will come and say, I have tight hamstrings. The reality is with that is that's not always a tightness of the muscle. That can often be a weakness of that muscle or an inactivity of the muscle surrounding it, causing that muscle to actually tighten up to have to support all the other ones who aren't functioning. So having a program or a corrective program to improve these ranges of motion is very important, but it doesn't just mean stretching. So looking at a particular movement, for example, an active straight leg raise where you lie on the floor, raise your leg up to 90 degrees. If somebody's unable to perform that movement, the instant thought is, oh, they have tight hamstrings. But the reality might be that those hamstrings might not be physically short. They may just not be working properly because the muscles around it aren't functioning, so it has to tighten up and stop itself from injuring. So the body will never allow you to go into a range of motion that it can't stabilize. So the important part of improving flexibility or mobility is to give time and spend time working on these movement patterns that will improve the range of motion of that joint. The recommendation I give for people who are genuinely serious about increasing their flexibility is you need to be spending 20 minutes a day, every day, working on the areas that you're not good at. And if you train that day, you need to do an extra 20 minutes on top of that. Now that for a lot of people is a lot of time, but that's the reality of getting good quality improvements of flexibility for people as well. One of the other parts is training through a full range of motion. And a lot of people train and they work in the gym. If they don't go through a full range of motion because they're trying to lift weights that are too heavy for them or they're trying to compensate, they're not going to get the benefits of the extra range they're going through. So again, taking your time and building yourself up and not giving into the weight culture of getting into the gym room and giving into the bravado of trying to lift heavy weights beyond your ability is key to developing a good quality flexibility program as well. Best to think of strength as a continuum. At one end of the scale there is a need to be able to perform very high speed movements with low amounts of weight. So for example, moving your body weight very, very quickly or kicking a ball. On the other end of the continuum, the further end, there's an ability to generate high levels of force, but more slowly. The important part of this is to train the whole continuum. So to be able to lift heavy things or have a good base level of strength and also to be able to use that level of strength at very high speeds. So running, jumping, evading a tackler, chasing a ball. But the base level is also very, very important. For those looking or concerned about putting on large levels of muscle, it's always been thought, and it really is a thought from the dark ages, that lifting heavy weights slowly makes you slow. In fact, it's the opposite. If you imagine that the old style of internet connection where we used to have dial-up, that's your base level of strength. But in order to be able to transfer that to the pitch, think of the new fibre broadband. You need to be able to access that base level of strength and express it on the football pitch. And that's where you see these people who are quick, they're sharp, they're able to change direction, they're able to jump high. And that can be increased with the right level of strength training. How to avoid putting on too much muscle mass is to stay out of an area that encourages that. So increasing muscle mass is all about doing lots and lots of volume, moderate amount of weights. So for example, sticking between 6 and 12 repetitions all the time, 4 to 8 sets per muscle group, and more of a bodybuilding approach, which has obviously filtered into the gym environment, which shouldn't be there. It's not designed for sport, and we need to move away from that. We need to move away from those thought processes of kind of fixed, static machine exercises, and start to think more about the use of more modern techniques in terms of developing younger players. Speed is a strength quality. So being able to move your body weight. When we talk about speed, we usually talk about moving your body weight at the fastest speed possible, and there's many different ways to do this, but the key part of speed, if you take athletics for example, all of those athletes that run 100 meters at that pace, take Usain Bolt as an example, one of the key areas they work on is their technique. Speed itself is a skill, and being able to run at those super high speeds. But we can transfer that over onto the training environment or the pitch in terms of football by taking elements of athletics and incorporating them into their development, but not overdoing it. You know, we don't want to turn these people into track athletes, and we can't unless we train every day in those speed elements. But there's certain kind of exercises that have the most bang for their buck that we can transfer over. So as an example, plyometrics is probably the foundation of how some of these younger athletes can, or as they're developing, increase their speed without having too much of an understanding of the technique, which is very, very complex. Plyometrics is the ability of the body to be able to absorb energy and produce it. So using, for example, your spring-like tendons, ligaments, soft tissue in the body, and being able to then express it quickly. So jumping or running is probably the most simple form of plyometric exercise. Something that's been around for years and years. It's how it's implemented is important. So for these younger players developing, a plyometric program that has on average about up to 120 or 140 contacts per week, so how many times their feet hit the floor, is great at developing them over time. So starting them being able to jump and land and hold that landing and absorb the force, then teaching them how to jump and jump again, so how to be able to move quickly, and then teaching them how to jump higher and jump further. All of those things transfer over into developing speed. So plyometric training is, for a simpler term, jumping and variation of jumping exercises, both on 2 feet and on 1 foot. The best way to explain how plyometrics can improve speed or improve power or that quickness on the pitch is thinking of dropping a tennis ball and a golf ball from the same height. Because the golf ball is so tightly bound and has so much tension, the golf ball will rebound from say a slate floor much higher than a tennis ball will. That's the easiest way to explain how that might improve in the body's limbs as well. The whole science behind regeneration, post-game and post-training, is really improved over the last, say, 5 to 10 years. Yeah, you've probably seen a lot of people in gyms and different training environments using things like soft tissue trigger point therapy balls or foam rollers. This is a great way in terms of actually encouraging repair of tissue post-training or post-game. There's probably one of the most important parts of regeneration is actually someone's nutrition. If they're not eating well and they're not actually putting good fuel into the body, their body's not going to be able to recover properly. Likewise, sleep is probably one of the top two in terms of encouraging people to get a good sleeping pattern. For younger people, you're talking between 10 hours plus. For adults, you're looking at 7 to 9 hours to get a proper recovery. And that's the difficult thing. A lot of people working busy lives or having a lot going on, especially in areas, the capital city like London, that sleep pattern is a hard thing to implement. So education is key on sleep and nutrition, and understanding that all these things affect how well you're going to recover from your training on a Monday and a Wednesday, for example, or on that game that you finish on a Saturday and a Sunday, how ready you're going to be to train during the week. So key things like soft tissue work, so looking after your body, stretching, trigger point therapy, working with physios as soon as you can is always going to help as well. The off seasons in rugby and football are very, very similar. That 1 to 2 month period around start of the summer, and this is such an important time for getting that head start coming into the actual pre-season and then going into your season. And you know, yes, one of the important parts is to let the body have a rest if you've had a long 9-10 month season, but there's a lot that you can be doing within this time to be able to get a head start. And so for me, without question, some of the better players or better athletes that we have are the ones that take this element more seriously. So working on those areas based off of a movement screen, for example, improving your hip mobility or your shoulder mobility or areas you're more likely to get injured, so having a corrective program in your off season. Using this time to maybe lay off the intensity of those strength training programs and work on some of the other elements that you didn't get time to as much during the season. So for example, a little bit of time to work on potentially some improvements in muscle mass or some increases in range of motion will really help. And also just looking at a time to allow the body to recover. So having strategies in place to get the right amount of sleep, work on your nutrition elements and refresh the mind as well. So spending time, a lot of the players in off season tend to go and try something new to keep it fresh. So for example, something like yoga or Pilates to work on something they'd never work on during the season, and they have great improvements and really positive benefits from this as well. So in terms of sustaining a good quality of intensity for 90 minutes, there's lots of different elements in football. So if you think of it as the 3 zones that are required for those 90 minutes, the first zone is your basic aerobic zone, where you have to be able to move from area to area at a low to moderate speed, and basically get around to your different positions. You look at your second zone as being your more moderate kind of level pace runs. So you're trying to chase down a tackler or get onto a ball or move to a new position. Your third zone then is looking at your high intensity maximal sprints. So that's your have to get to a ball, have to make a tackle, and that's your maximum 100% intensity. Training all those different elements, just as I said previously with strength and having a wide variation in your ability is really important. So you need to break up your training weeks or your training months to cater to all of those things. So you need a good aerobic base to help support all of the different zones that you need to be working in. You need your moderate area, which a lot of people call around your lactate zone, your lactate threshold zone, and you need to be able to perform those high intensity sprints. So you need to divide up, depending on your position, depends on how much of each of those are going to be most vital. Are you in a position that requires you to move much more, for example, playing in midfield or working the wings, or are you someone who's going to be more static but needs that higher levels of power? So you can tailor that towards it. In terms of building stamina, cardiovascular training has been around for a very long time, and one of the areas we look at is, well, where can we get the biggest improvements in the cardiovascular system without fatiguing the body too much? So for example, if you're a footballer and you're spending a lot of time on your feet and a lot of time on the pitch, we tend to use variable exercises that take you off your feet. So for example, putting you onto a bike or putting you onto a VersaClimber, something that doesn't have all that impact onto the ground. Swimming can be another great way of doing that if people have the time, but we often use those for recovery sessions. So building stamina to be able to maintain those 90 minutes means having all of those three elements in the right amounts, and having a program tailored towards that, which we will outline for you. One of the key things to think about in terms of the athletic side is that often talent is what's looked at a lot in football, but there's a lot of players who'll admit that maybe they're not the most talented, but they worked harder than everyone else. Having a program that's well thought out and specific to you is key. Frequency and dedication to your training program is also very, very important. One of the biggest things that sets aside the average to the exceptional players is those who put the extra hours in when nobody's looking. How you execute and what you do when nobody's looking determines how well you perform when people are. And it's those extra hours in the gym on the early mornings that you put in and you deliver to your program is going to be what's key.